To everyone who pulls me aside to whisper with the best intentions, you have already won. I am sorry, but the days of moral victories are over. And as my father told me years ago, when the right wins power, the left writes a great book. Those days are over too.
Welcome, y'all, to the Jacobin Show. My name is David Griscom, and I'll be your host, joined as always by my good friend and comrade, Matt Leck. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, David. Good to be with you.
This is going to be a lot of fun. It's been a long time coming. We've been working hard planning out this show, and we're so excited to finally be releasing it to all of y'all. And I couldn't imagine a better time to be doing it after this huge, momentous win of Zohran Mamdani in New York. We're going to be having a lot of conversations today about what lessons we can learn from it and how we can try to replicate that all across the country and, in fact, the world. But just a little bit about what we're planning on doing here. We're going to be having conversations with Jacobin writers, labor leaders, politicians, thinkers, and we really want to hear from y'all about who you would like us to have on the program, what things you would like us to cover. Jacobin has been such an important part of my life and my journey as a Democratic Socialist, so I'm really excited to be joining up with them and producing this show along with Matt. And this is also very personally important for me. If you're unfamiliar, I am the host along with Matt of Left Reckoning. We first met as producers on the Michael Brooks Show. And Michael was very, very passionate about building out the YouTube portion of Jacobin. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to complete that mission, but we're very excited to be continuing that work and keeping that spirit alive and bringing y'all a weekly show every Friday at 10 a.m., 9 a.m. Central. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining us. Matt, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say to introduce yourself to the audience before we get into all this fun stuff we got today.
It's crazy that it's been a half decade since the original run of the Jacobin Show, and I'm very honored by all the people who, when we sort of broke this news early to them that we were bringing this back, missed it, so acutely. I
mean, the Jacobin Show was so huge and was so important, and we're really excited to be continuing that work. Y'all will be hearing from familiar faces very, very soon, but we're really excited to be launching this program today, and we have a full show for y'all. Typically, we're going to mainly have one guest, but we have two because this is such a momentous occasion. We have Eric Blanc to talk about some of the strategic lessons we can learn from Zohran's historic victory. And we are also going to be joined by National DSA co-chair Ashik Siddique to talk a little bit about DSA, what makes it different, and why it ended up being so successful in New York. But before we get into the serious stuff, it's been a lot of fun watching some of the freak out. And we got some clips here to see how some of the folks, particularly the rich, particularly the right, aren't too excited about what happened over the weekend. So maybe, Matt, let's start with this Squawk Box clip that we have.
Yeah, this is hot off the presses of our business cable news. So they're getting really serious over there. And this is, what is his name, Sorkin, talking about some effects Zohran is already having on our business leaders who, we expect to steward our economy into the future.
The wealthy who might be looking for a therapist after yesterday's election. And more importantly, were looking for therapy when they heard that Lina Khan was joining the transition team.
Which just goes to show you, looking back at the Biden administration, I mean, she had a very important job and we had her on all the time and hung on.
I think we should have her back and talk about what's going to happen in New York City.
But let's just know. Okay, so as long as we know, what I mean, she is a
No, but that's what I'm saying.
She was running a very important department in the Biden administration.
Well, no, I wonder what it portends for business in New York. It was funny.
It's great for business. It's awesome.
A number of business leaders in New York reached out to me yesterday. I was traveling back from London, and it wasn't even the election result itself. It was when this Lina Khan announcement was made.
Right.
It was like they were sort of like frozen in place, and talked. I mean, some of the texting and back and forth was more about sort of what had happened to the merger business. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of bankers in this city, financiers in this city, and sort of what the approach is. I don't know if she's going to have a role in the future.
What can she do, though? I mean,
the future group or not?
What my question was, this appears to nationalize a city mayoral staff, right? Instead of saying we're going to operate the city as good managers, which is what the mayor's job is, it somehow makes it seem like we're going to be a platform for some national ideological...
I don't know. I mean, I was also surprised by that there were so many people from the de Blasio administration.
So, Matt, you are muted.
I just wanted to get that last point because the guy tries to make it into something about like, oh, they're so focused with national, and then the next point Sorkin makes is, oh yeah, they're bringing a lot of alumni from the previous administration in, but yeah, very Lena Khan.
It shows how tired the playbook is of folks who are friendly to the rich and to the powerful. That, like, you know, Zohran Mamdani in this campaign has been, you know, something that has been so front and center, not just in New York, but nationally at this point. And people had plenty of opportunity to be kind of turned off or scared. And they weren't. Over and over and over, when people were having those conversations at the door, folks were not just saying, wow, this sounds good, but how can I get involved and how can I help this out? Because it sounds very nice if, like, the government actually starts looking out for working people. And it shows, again, I mean, just how afraid and well off the kind of financial class in this country has been, that the kind of antitrust politics that Lena Khan represents is seen as just such an existential threat to them. Is because they don't want to have regulations on them, right? Yep. They don't want there to be public oversight over their operations. And yeah, you know, I think if you are somebody who wants to take advantage of working class people to fleece them, you should be worried. If you're somebody who wants to be able to live like a nice, comfortable life, a life of dignity in New York City, you should be really, really excited. And the fact of the matter is that it's a very, very small minority of people who are afraid of this. And it's because they are inherently opposed to this kind of like democratic economic populist politics that has been so effective, represented by Zohran Mamdani.
It's monopoly capitalism has lost the base for capitalists because Zohran won, like, small businesses around Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Have Zohran posters, and they've had it up since this summer. He won them over massively. It's not just, you know, renters in the commie corridor. And Lena Khan represents something that capitalism could benefit from massively, like it did the FDR sort of reforms. It would give it a new lease on life because the concentration creates a contradiction that is not sustainable, politically or otherwise, for that system. And they're acting like she is. And then I saw there's another one, Patrick Bet-David. We don't have time. We'll introduce the folks to Patrick Bet-David who don't know him in the future. But they're talking about like the rent control policies and the rent freeze as if they don't understand what the, you know, administrative capabilities of mayors in New York historically have been. Like it's some sort of new thing, or like the grocery stores, as if Zohran is coming in saying all the grocery stores are city owned now. They don't have the capacity, and instead they fall back on these two sort of amulets between that are kind of like hard to use at the same time. To say he's a scary Muslim that's instituting the first steps of Sharia law, and also he's a communist revolutionary. And when neither of those things work on him, like they're left floundering.
Well, I mean, I think this is the point, and something we should be very excited about here, is that socialism is just no longer a scary word to most American citizens. And yeah, they've relied on that for a long time. They've also relied on politics being something that's only for the elite, right? It's mediated through like major mainstream media, right? Those are the only people who get airtime, who get their message across. And in large part, it's been mediated by this like hyper donor class. And Zohran was able to beat both of those throughout his campaign. And it really goes to show that, like, despite all of the claims by those on the right, by those in the financial media, that they actually represent like the real common sense position. No, they're the ones who are the fanatics. They are the ones who are out of touch. And on that, let's maybe get to Steve Bannon, one of the masterminds behind Trump's first victory, and his analysis of the election. This is shortly after Zohran Mamdani was announced as the winner of the election last week.
Here's how he's done it. He kind of took the Trump playbook to the Working Family Party and the DSA have a beast of a ground game. They've got thousands of people canvassing every day. They're bringing every potential. This is why in Brooklyn you're seeing these, in these other sectors of New York City, you're seeing these kind of numbers, because Cuomo had all the money in the primary, had $40 million. This kid had nothing. It's about putting it together. And the Working Family Party and DSA are essentially Marxist entities, okay? But they've got ground game. Just like the Bolsheviks know about ground game, these guys got it. They went and knocked on doors. They didn't rely on TV ads. And that's what you're seeing tonight. In the establishment in New York City, forget the Republican establishment. The Republican Party is irrelevant. But the business establishment, the financial community establishment, kept this dream going on that Eric Adams and Sliwa were going to drop out and give Cuomo a shot. It didn't materialize.
So, from his mouth to God's ears, I'll tell you, it is 100% true that the establishment has just been completely shown as ineffective and as unrepresentative of everyday people. And this is a victory that we should take beyond just this one victory. The whole country was watching this, and they were looking to see how somebody like Zohran Mamdani would be able to do once they went up against one, a political dynasty, one against like a very, very well-funded candidate in Cuomo. And Mamdani was shown to not only be effective, but actually just able to completely dominate in every aspect this Democratic Party establishment, this pro-business, anti-worker establishment. And they're afraid. And I think Steve Bannon, is definitely a ridiculous figure. But I take his fear as a badge of honor. And I think that's something that we all should be taking as well.
Yeah, I'll say I don't want to get too deep into, complaints I have with the Working Families Party, say when maybe Bernie Sanders was running for president previously.
That's how we know you're a vet, Matt.
What's amazing is this Zohran campaign really healed a lot of the distrust between the sort of establishment-y progressive left and the more socialist left. And I think it's a really important thing that basically progressives realized that we have to bend the knee and let socialists lead and not think that we could be junior partners with corporate Democrats. That is a huge shift, and that is a direct threat to Bannon, because Bannon is, look, he was a Goldman Sachs banker, I think. He was also a movie producer. He's a snake oil salesman. He is there to lie about this stuff entirely. So when he says, there's a clip we played years ago on our show of him saying Bernie turned his back on the working class. And, well, it turns out that Bernie is more consistent on certain things like even H-1B visas than Donald Trump is and his guy. And so like these sort of things about who is representative of the working class, it's worked for Bannon because the Democratic establishment hasn't been able to contest it. Exactly. They've given it up.
And I think that this is one of the important messages to take from this. And one of the reasons that I'm feeling so confident on this is that our opponents are running scared because, for a very long time, the right, the Democrat, and the kind of financial class has been able to take advantage of a situation where you have a Democratic establishment that is unwilling or uninterested in speaking to the needs of everyday working class people. And at a moment right now where so many people are so frustrated and so worried about what's going on, I mean, what's happening just, down the road from me here in Austin on a regular basis is horrendous. These ICE raids, these attacks on working class people. The fact that so many people are looking for an answer, right? And they're not finding in the Democratic leadership. They're finding it in Zohran Mamdani's campaign and in Democratic Socialism. And I think that we should take a lot of confidence for our position in that, is that it's not just, we're finding answers in like a kind of stronger, more pugnacious kind of politics, but actually politics that is centered in the needs of working class people and the belief that working class people should have a say over their lives, and in democratic socialism. And they have no answer for it. And I think maybe to wrap this up, we can look at my governor's reaction to Zohran's victory, which I think again shows that these boys are running scared. Greg Abbott says, after the polls close tomorrow night, I will impose a 100% tariff on anyone moving to Texas from New York. And of course, it's a totally nonsensical position, but it shows that these guys don't even have any answers anymore. Because for so long, they screamed Marxism, communism, socialism, in Zohran's case, Sharia law. And every time they did that, people look towards Zohran, they say, man, I kind of like what this guy is about and what he's saying. For so long, these guys have gotten so lazy in politics because they haven't had a real opposition to go up against. They haven't had to go up against the politics that really centers the needs of everyday people in a kind of visceral, moving, mobilizing, and motivating way. And they have no answer for it. And this is a time for us to kind of really go full on the attack and build up a strong alternative that can win from New York to Houston, all across the country. So I'm feeling really damn good about this. We have a lot coming up. We're going to talk a lot of strategy. We're going to be speaking with Eric Blanc. We're going to be speaking with Ashik Siddique. We're really excited to be launching the Jacobin program. Please subscribe, keep up with it. There's going to be a lot of really wonderful conversations coming very, very soon. But let's get to our first conversations, Matt. Welcome, everybody, to the Jacobin Show. My name is David Griscom, joined, as always, by my good friend, super producer, Matt Leck. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, David. Good to be with you.
And we're thrilled to be having on this first episode of the show, Eric Blanc. Eric Blanc is an assistant professor of labor studies at Rutgers. He has an excellent Substack, Labor Politics, and he's also the author of We Are the Union, How Worker-to-Worker Organizing is Revitalizing Labor and Winning Big. We're going to be talking about a lot today. But Eric, we've gotten this news that basically there has been significant defection, let's call it, from the Democratic Party to reopen the government. I mean, could you talk a little bit about what this means and really the kind of devastating news that it is?
Yeah, it's horrible news. The Democratic leadership has found a way to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. All of the leverage was on the Democrats' side in this fight. Trump was getting blamed for the shutdown. Last Tuesday was a decisive sort of repudiation of the Trump regime. And nevertheless, Senator Schumer, who's the Senate minority leader, essentially gave the green light to a minority of his caucus to end the shutdown on the Republicans' term. Schumer voted no, but we need to be really clear that that's just covered. The way this works is they let some people take the blame, but there's no world in which this could have happened without the explicit and active backing of Schumer. And we should just be clear, it's a horrific decision because we're talking about tens of millions of Americans who are now see their healthcare premiums bumped up, millions, if not more, potentially losing healthcare altogether. And so just on a sort of human level, it's really devastating. And on a political level, it's just suicidal. There was no reason they had to do this. And I'm frankly just incensed that the Democratic Party leadership is this bad. I already thought they were very bad, but even on my own very low expectations, they've exceeded the level of cowardice and idiocy that I thought was possible. And I would just add, this has only been possible in part because the union movement did not put up a real fight around this in a serious way. The major federal workers union leadership 2 weeks ago called on the Democrats to cave and to cede in the shutdown fight on the Republicans' terms. And, I understand if you're a federal worker not getting paid, this is a real crisis. This shutdown's horrible. But that doesn't explain why you would pressure the Democrats instead of the Republicans. There's a world in which you could have forced the Republicans to have caved. And I think that was totally feasible, given the momentum and the relationship of forces. So, yeah, it's idiocy, cowardice, and it's just a debacle all around.
Well, I think this really brings us to this moment and this good news, because what happened in New York last week was nothing short of historic. And it really, I think, shows a different path forward for politics in this country. And obviously, everybody watching the Jacobin Show knows who we're talking about. We're talking to Zohran Mamdani. It was an incredible campaign. And I mean, maybe before we get into some of the reasons why he won, what it's going to look like, I mean, could you just kind of put this in perspective, why this is such a big victory for our political movement? Because really, I think a lot of people didn't expect that we were going to get a win like this again.
Yeah, it's a historic breakthrough on all sorts of different grounds. There's never been a Democratic Socialist mayor of the biggest, most important city in American economy, American politics, world politics. So we've never had this amount of sort of power within the government. We also saw just a repudiation of the Democratic Party establishment. This was in many ways a referendum on whether we want the Schumers of the world to be leading the Democrats, or we want fighters, people like Bernie, people like Zohran, or others. This was a clear message to the Democratic Party that working people in the traditional Democratic base are fed up with politics as usual. And it showed actually a way out for the Democratic Party as a whole, whose brand is toxic across the country. People see it as elite captured. And I don't think that Zohran's exact candidacy or exact politics are going to be replicated everywhere. It's going to look different if you're in Nebraska, if you're in the South. But the basic message and the basic sort of type of campaign is the same. You need to run someone who's actually anti-elite, who's not part of the establishment, and they need to run on a message that working people deserve economic security, they deserve economic dignity, and the only way you're going to get that is if you take on the billionaires. That basic message resonates anywhere in the country, and it's that message and that fight that we're going to see more and more coming to the fore, especially after things like Schumer and company's capitulation.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit because, for people who are unfamiliar with Eric is, an incredible strategist, has written a lot on a kind of political strategy and labor strategy. And like the Zohran campaign, I think, has tremendous lessons both on messaging, but also on a campaign. So could you talk a little bit about what really you saw working so well, both with Zohran as a candidate and as a campaign, but also, they mobilized so many people to knock on doors. That really created a very effective political force in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, the basic takeaway in some ways is obvious and has been widely noted, which is that Zohran was relentlessly focused on affordability. And I think that's crucial. He talked to working class people's real anger and their real desire to see an improvement in their lives. But I think that it goes beyond that because, frankly, like Clintonism and sort of Democratic Party hacks can also talk about kitchen table issues. It wasn't just that he was talking about people's sort of pocketbook issues. He was saying the way we're going to tackle those is by ambitious governmental policy, not just sort of tweaks to the free market that are going to provide free childcare, free buses, a rent freeze. So the solution offered was different than the centrists who, also can talk about the economy if they want. And he said, we're going to make this happen by taking on the billionaires. So again, like that is a message that isn't just affordability. It's affordability sort of through social democracy and through class struggle. And as far as the campaign itself, and this is another big difference, I think, with average Democratic campaign, is it relied on a real movement from below. There's no world in which Zohran would be able to win if he hadn't come out of the Democratic Socialists of America, if he hadn't helped build a movement of over 100,000 volunteers. That's huge. 100,000 volunteers, door knocking. It's bonkers. I don't think there's anything at that scale. I literally don't think any campaign has ever, per capita had that number of volunteers. And so that's the type of movement building that we need because we're going up against, really powerful forces. Zohran's going up against powerful forces. And the only way he was able to beat Cuomo is because he could rely on people spreading the message from below. And you couldn't walk a block in New York City if you had a Zohran pin or a hat on without getting, a thumbs up or some sort of just like happiness. It really felt that New Yorkers were coming together around this. And Zohran, I think, has a huge, obviously Zohran built an amazing campaign, but it's not just his charisma. I think people sort of talk about that a bit and overblow that. Obviously, he's very charismatic, but there's a lot of people who are charismatic, and he was able to channel that charisma into a fighting message and a fighting movement.
Well, I kind of want to zero in on this. I will just say two things. I think this is huge for the country, and in many ways outside of just New York, because a lot of people are so frustrated with the Trump regime and what we're seeing from them. The fact of the matter that I think now the most dynamic, most exciting kind of opposition to Trump is not just happening in a progressive way, but somebody who's explicitly a democratic socialist, I think is going to be huge, not just in New York City, but I think all across the country, in actually like building up an alternative that is so much more than rhetoric. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this because I think that one of our tasks in the media and just in general is going to be kind of pushing back against this narrative that's coming up about Zohran. It's like, oh, Zohran was great because he's good at TikTok, or Zohran was great because his videos are great. Don't get me wrong. They're amazing. We shared them. I love them. But you can have a good media team behind you, and if you don't have this kind of message of economic populism, of social democracy, like he did, I don't think it would be as successful. And I think there's going to be a lot of really cheap imitators in the next few months. So, I mean, how can we really make sure that the message to the public generally is so clear, is that like it was the message and the politics behind the movement, not just so much like the form that it took?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because you already see Democrats spinning this, right? And the major takeaway that, I've heard Gavin Newsom and others kind of give the spin is, well, you need to communicate well, you need to, rely on the new tools of social media. And that stuff is true, but it's honestly like not so new. It's not like Kamala Harris didn't understand that social media was important. But the problem is that if you don't have a compelling message, and if you don't have an authentic spokesperson, because I think it's two things. It's Kamala Harris could have said, I'm fighting the billionaires, but nobody would have believed her. And she periodically said some rhetoric a little bit like that, but it lands as fake, because everybody knows that she's taking money, and she took money from the capitalist class, and everybody knows she's part of the elite itself. So it just doesn't resonate. So you need a message, but you also need, an authentic, tribune for that message. And that might not always be Democratic Socialist. For instance, you could look at Dan Osborne in Nebraska. His credibility, he was able to signal to people that he's not just part of this old rotten establishment, because he was a union worker. He led a strike. So there's also different ways that you can sort of signal to the population that this is different. But it's going to require a fight, and I think that Jacobin show and DSA and sort of left media generally has a real responsibility right now to make the case to the American public that we have the answers for the way out to fight Trumpism, and the Democratic Party establishment doesn't, because there's going to be a real blurring of lines. And it's tricky, because we needed an alliance with the Democrat establishment against Trump, so there's, it's a complicated dynamic. But the only way we're going to succeed is if that we're crystal clear on what makes democratic socialism and class struggle different from the kind of just like rhetoric and mealy-mouthness that even progressive Democrats or liberal Democrats are still stuck in.
Well, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit more, because, so as people who don't know me, I'm in Austin, Texas. Building a strong left-wing movement in the South is something that's really important to me, and I can already kind of hear the rhetoric. It's like, well, Zohran wins in New York because like New York is quote unquote like this super liberal city. You wrote a really great piece after the election, where you're talking a little bit about some of the research that's come out of the Center for Working Class Politics. It might take a little bit of a different format in other parts of the country, but could you talk a little bit about how this isn't something, this kind of messaging, and why this is so effective isn't just limited to New York? And if I could just throw in something, one of my experiences here in Texas has been just amazement at how many folks want to talk to me about Zohran Mamdani. A lot of times people don't want to talk about New York politics, myself included here, but a lot of people are very excited, even who can't vote or won't directly benefit from these kind of policies. So, could you talk about how this isn't something that is just limited to New York, or what kind of major lessons people can pull from this in parts of the country outside of New York or LA or San Francisco?
The first thing I would say is that we shouldn't overstate the difference between New York and the rest of the country. Like, just keep in mind, 3 out of our last 4 mayors were conservatives. Giuliani, think about it, Giuliani, not a socialist, not a progressive. Eric Adams, not a socialist, not a progressive. Bloomberg, not a socialist, not a progressive. So the idea that somehow there's the water is different in New York, so things that happen here don't happen elsewhere is just wrong. We had one of the biggest shifts in New York towards Trump of anywhere in the nation, and many of those voters voted for Zohran because he was able to speak to them and speak to their anger. So I do think that, one of the big takeaways for anywhere in the country is that you can win by driving up youth turnout, right? So this is what Zohran really did. He won across the board with working class people, but just dominated amongst young people. And I think the number I saw was that there was over the turnout of young voters increased by 4 times as much compared to 2021. So you just have a dramatically different electorate. And this is interesting because this is a theory that we've had on the left, like we could make that happen. We hoped Bernie was going to be able to do that, and he wasn't, if we're being honest. So something has changed in the electorate. I think after, Trump's second election, so many people are just looking for something different. And the moment is of such crisis that there is the potential to really tap people who haven't yet been participating in the political process. So part of the way you win up nationally is by expanding the electorate. And that's true anywhere. So if you're going to speak to young men, if you're going to speak to young voters who didn't vote for Kamala, you need to be able to have a message and a messenger like Zohran. And again, it might not be democratic socialism. I don't think we need to die on that hill in Texas, but it could be. Depends on what part of Texas. Austin's different. Austin's probably more left leaning than New York, as far as I know, voting wise. But the basic message that working people deserve more and that the billionaires are the obstacle to making that happen. What part of the country does that not make sense in? Nobody can make that case. I've yet to hear anybody say, worker people here actually don't want better lives, and working people here aren't mad at rich people. And there's a slippage because the centrists refuse to acknowledge that it's not the case that we're so far left. They talk about a lot of the identity issues as as the sort of thing that's driving the Democratic Party down. And the reality is, if you center economic populism, and whatever we want to say about what takes you making the sort of cultural war issues, if you center economic populism, that actually puts you more in touch with working people all across the country, not less. And so the Democrats, establishment doesn't actually have a response to that claim. They can only sort of talk about trans kids and immigrants and say that's going to drag us down. And we saw with Zohran that actually when you center a working class agenda, that's what people want to talk about. When you center a working class agenda, then actually that's how you're going to unite working people to stop blaming, the people below them and start blaming the people up top. So if we're serious about winning rights for everybody, I think that the way you do that is through economic populism.
And I'll just note on top of that one of the things that I thought was so inspiring about Zohran is that he didn't kind of pivot right on those issues or anything like that. He just focused on that kind of economic populist politics. In a lot of ways, you could see the kind of influence of Bernie. But I think Zohran's version of it is also very inspiring and unique to him. But I want to make sure that we get to this before we let you go, Eric. Zohran is, the mayor-elect now. It's going to be a massive shift going from campaigning to government. What kind of expectations should we have for what that's going to be like? And also, what's the kind of responsibility of people who are actively engaged in politics, maybe nationwide, but specifically in New York, in making sure that these things come to be?
Look, Zohran upended the playbook for how you win an election, and I think we're going to have to upend the playbook now for how you relate to politicians once they're in power. Because the reality is, you're going up against some of the most powerful corporations and people in the world, Trump, but also just the billionaire class in New York City, and they're going to do everything possible to stop Zohran from achieving his goals. Kathy Hochul, our governor, is already doubling down on her opposition to taxing the rich, and the only way you move that world, the only way you free up the resources necessary to pass Zohran's ambitious agenda is basically if the people in power beyond him on a state level are so scared that they're going to get voted out of office that they understand that it's in their best interest to go along with this movement from below rather than try to stop it. And the way you get that level of organizing is you have to not only preserve the volunteer movement that Zohran has amazingly built, but deepen it. Because 100,000 people is great, but you're talking about New York City has over 8 million people, and you have the whole state of New York to pressure because this is a statewide issue. So I think what we need right now is, frankly, to deepen in a movement to call on Hochul and to call on all the state legislators to tax the rich to pass an agenda, not just for New York City, but across the state that meets working people's needs along the mandate that Zohran won. And if we're able to do that through mass petitions, mass demonstrations, a real campaign, get a fighting oligarchy tour up in upstate and places we don't yet have the sort of on-the-ground power we need, something that is really a genuine movement that is even bigger than what we saw with the Zohran campaign, if we're able to do that. And that's a big if, because there's a lot of institutional inertia. The left is very siloed. The left is very unambitious. And so it's going to take a big push to move in that direction. I think we can win. And the good news is that leaders coming out of the Zohran movement have already built a new kind of place for this movement to happen, where Democratic Socialists and Unionists and others can come together. It's called Our Time, which is essentially a mass campaign to win Zohran's agenda. And I think it's going to take that kind of massive united front campaign to pressure the people in power. It's going to take that to win.
As regards to Kathy Hochul, I'll just say she was initially against the congestion pricing policy that came in last year until there was enough outroar, and then it became a massive success when it was instituted in sort of smaller fashion, and she was campaigning on it just a few months later. So I think she's not as formidable of an obstacle, I think, as maybe the billionaires want her to be.
Or just look at what Cuomo did. Cuomo opposed taxing the rich, and then we forced him to tax the rich in 2021. So the movement was able to force, bad Democrats to do it before. And now with the movement we have around Zohran, we have even more power and even more momentum to do it. So I'm optimistic we will win, but it's going to take a big fight.
Yeah, and I'll just say in closing too that one of the things I think was so exciting about Zohran is that when he first ran, there's a lot of people who doubted him, not just in the political media but also on our side of politics. And I think there's a lesson here in kind of taking some confidence that we do have a kind of winning strategy, and we just need to have that commitment to do it, which is going to mean being creative. And in the same way that the Zohran campaign was very creative, figuring out how to keep that momentum while in office is also going to take a lot of creativity and confidence. But Eric, it is wonderful to have you on the program. Thank you so much. People should keep up with Eric's work. We'll have a lot of links below, but be sure to subscribe to the Labor Politics Substack. It's an excellent read every time. And again, thank you so much, friend.
Yeah, thanks for all the work you do.
Well, we got more Zohran coverage here. It's a really big damn deal, and we're really excited to be speaking with one of the co-chairs of the Democratic Socialists of America, Ashik Siddique. How are you doing, friend?
Great. Very good to be here. Very good to still be talking. We're just so hyped.
It's been amazing, and I want to ask you this before we get into some of the nuts and bolts and what's coming next. I have to ask anybody who's watching these results: did you expect it to be done so quickly?
I was there for the primary victory, and we were not ready then for the scale of the victory. So I think this time, we had a pretty good sense that he would win, but it wasn't clear how quickly or what the margin would be. Like, I think a lot of people, including me, were just waiting to see, is it going to be a straight up majority, or just like, will he have a mandate? So to see the numbers come in over 50% like that's the confirmation we needed. And yeah, just the reaction was so instant. Everyone, I was at a huge crowd at Nowadays in Queens. It was so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it was really an amazing experience to be there. I was really happy that I was able to make it up for it, because it was one of those things. I mean, you've been doing a lot of organizing and work for years. It was in a lot of ways, I don't know, it felt very revitalizing, because there's been a period of time where it felt like we might be on the back foot, and this really, I think, is setting us up strong for the future. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit. You're sitting in, in your position, sitting in the organization. I mean, how are you all kind of feeling about this Zohran victory?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understate what a huge win this is. It's a win for the working class. It's a win for socialist organization. It's a win for labor unions. It's a win for organized immigrant communities. This is the biggest electoral victory for the U.S. socialist movement in the past century. Like, we can't understate it, despite the millions of dollars invested to stop us from billionaires who have more money than ever before. So many people are struggling to get by, and the political establishment keeps it that way. Like, they put in a lot of effort to stop Zohran and the movement behind him, and they recognize that he represents an alternative, a city that works for all working people. And what makes this victory so powerful is that the people defeated the oligarchy. The working class defeated major corporations. Democratic socialism defeated the Democratic Party status quo. So that's what makes this so huge. Thousands of DSA members in New York City DSA played core roles in the campaign as staff and volunteers, knocking doors, calling voters, talking to coworkers, organizing their unions, organizing their communities. So this election really proves that what a lot of us had felt for the past decade, that democratic socialist ideas are popular, organized people can defeat the power of big money. But, it's hard to convince people and maintain morale unless you experience wins. So the scale of Zohran's win, I think, just gives people such a huge boost, like injection of, hope and inspiration through action. It's not just based on vibes. Zohran is so charismatic and such a great communicator, but the organization behind him and the policies he stood for that he's consistently advanced, that's the reason for the win. And that's what we keep saying. It's not just about making your TikTok videos and being charming. Those things help, but it's really about the policies. And yeah, Zohran was not afraid to say very boldly and directly what voters and majority of Americans believe. Just things like Palestine should be free. The U.S. should not be complicit in Israel's genocide. We need to address cost of living. We need to challenge the people standing in the way of universal policies for everybody. So this is a huge, decisive victory. But we're taking it in stride. We know that the real battles are just beginning. So we're going to have a lot of work cut out for us to enact this agenda.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit before we get into maybe some of the strategies going forward. I really want to highlight this as much as I possibly can to the audience and to the country, frankly, how important the fact is that Zohran is not just a Democratic Socialist, but a member of the DSA, right? There's a lot of coalition partners, but I don't think you win this election, certainly in the way that he did, without him being, DSA. So, they call it the DSA difference. What's the DSA difference here with Zohran?
Yeah, it's a bunch of the things that I mentioned, just that DSA members, we don't just do paper endorsements. We don't just sign off on somebody who's saying nice things with a nice platform. We really throw down when we endorse somebody. Like Zohran had 100,000 volunteers knocking doors, canvassing, and that didn't just happen. His campaign was organized by DSA members. He had the endorsement of New York City DSA, which is a long, very thorough process. And he comes out of our organization. He actually got to start organizing in 2017. I think he joined DSA like a lot of us when Trump first got elected. I myself joined that year. And he was a field organizer on the campaign of somebody named Kader El-Yatim, who was the first New York City DSA candidate who the chapter endorsed back in 2017 for city council. He was a Palestinian pastor in Bay Ridge, which is a neighborhood I happen to be from in South Brooklyn. And he didn't win, but he got a third of the vote. That was kind of a training wheels campaign for New York City DSA to develop their ground game. And Zohran was one of the many members who threw down for it and then learned a lot of skills. And then year after year, he kept building them. So he represents what we're trying to do more and more in DSA, which is run people who come out of our organization, who have experience through DSA as a membership organization that has our own internal democracy, and having that experience of doing collective organizing and collective strategy. That's what he represents. He's been in a block in the state assembly with, I think, 9 other people in state assembly and Senate in New York State who've been operating as a block, who've been operating basically like a party. DSA is not formally a political party, but we're operating more and more like one. We have membership democracy that shapes strategy, and the people we elect in office we expect to carry forward, the platform, the agenda that our members want. So Zohran has experience doing that and being, when it's necessary, being pretty oppositional against the Democratic Party establishment that stands in the way of these very popular ideas.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's important for people in the general progressive milieu about like what makes DSA so different. One, like you have the membership and you have the ability to like really mobilize a lot of people, and as you noted, like 100,000 volunteers. I mean, this is historic. But on top of this, I mean, Zohran didn't just like fall from the moon, right? A lot of people might have not known him before he announced that he was running for mayor. But this is somebody who had years and years and years of experience as a candidate, as somebody in our movement. And like, what's the difference here that you really get from just somebody who might have just been an activist, let's say, for a very long time, when somebody is really like in and of the organization coming into a position like the mayor of the largest city in the United States?
Yeah, so DSA is an organization that it formed in 1982, decades ago, but has really transformed over the past decade to become an organization that is operating more and more like a party of our own. Our policy as an organization is that we're building a working class alternative to the Republicans and the Democrats. We know that the U.S. electoral system makes it very difficult to build a new independent party, which is why in this moment most Democratic Socialist candidates run as Democrats. But we're interested in electoral reform that would change the United States into a real multi-party democracy, and that the effort to build an organization that works like a party as a real independent alternative, that's a core thing that sets DSA apart. We're not just an organization advocating for a bunch of issues that we care about, although that's core to it. Our theory of change is really about transforming the electoral system, building a real independent electoral alternative, and being very grounded in the labor movement and rebuilding labor unions. We don't see labor as just a constituency to appease, like, many others, which is how the Democrats have been treating it for decades, and really giving it short shrift, and selling out labor unions. So at a time when organized labor is the weakest it's been in many decades, we see rebuilding the labor movement to be strong and more independent and militant, to be core to our theory of change. And that's how we win anything on climate, on internationalism, on trans rights, migrant rights. So on so many things we care about, we need our own electoral power, and we need the power of labor unions. So that's really core to it. Zohran has experience working with DSA. He stood up with, taxi workers, for example. Like, famously, he went on hunger strike with taxi workers who were demanding debt relief, and helped them win. So, people see the credibility that comes through that kind of organizing.
Well, let's talk. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about the DSA as a national organization here. I mean, first of all, have we seen a bump in membership since Zohran won? Are people translating this win
absolutely.
To DSA? Yeah.
People are joining DSA. I mentioned 100,000 people have knocked doors for him. The vast majority of them are not DSA members. But New York City DSA alone, which is our largest chapter, a little over a year ago, they're at 5,000 members. They more than doubled in size over the past year through the primary to over 11,000 members. And now, since the win, in the past week, I think we have something like 3,000 or 4,000 members who've joined. We just passed 86,000 members this morning. So people are joining. People see that DSA was a core driver of this, and we're recruiting. We're shooting for 100K. Let's see how fast we get there. But we need to grow very quickly to absorb a lot of new people, and to keep, really keep building the momentum.
Ashik, I have a question for you, just to kind of clarify things for the audience. There are some organizations out there that might have, like, I don't know, let's call them a larger paper member list or something like that. What's the difference about being like a DSA member versus maybe being on like an email mailing list for some of these other progressive organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some people might hear a number like 86,000 and think, all right, well, there's 350 million people in the country. There's organizations like, MoveOn.org or whatever that have millions of people on a mailing list, right? In DSA, membership means something. A membership is based on paying dues, whatever you can pay, but it also gives you the rights to help make decisions in our organization. Most of the work in our organization happens at the level of chapters. We have 200 chapters all over the country. They're all member-led, member-organized. So, they have different structures, but typically there's something like monthly or quarterly meetings where people can show up and be part of our internal democracy, decide what kind of work to do together, how to use the resources of the membership dues. So these are all things that, we're rebuilding democracy at every level. We want our government to be more democratic. We want democracy in workplaces and our labor unions. And we think democracy in an organization is really critical to getting there. So we're trying to practice democracy at every level of what we do. And that internal democracy is really important. In a lot of activism and movement organizations, you might, you just sign up for an organization, you're on a mailing list,
heavy.
Maybe you get text to do something, money. They're very top heavy. They're asking you for money primarily, and we're asking you for money too and your dues, but that's not it. We don't want DSA to be an experience like getting text messages from Nancy Pelosi, like frantically just begging you for whatever in ways that feel bad. It feels kind of, you don't feel any agency. It's like you're just being asked for things without the opportunity to give back and shape the direction. Well, like the actual opportunity to shape what is happening and how it happens. That's something that really sets DSA apart. Like the electoral campaigns we run, it's not just, we're not like the Democrats hiring all these consultants and doing focus groups with advertising. Mm-hmm. Our campaigns are meant to be as distributed as possible. We want to give people opportunities to plug in and help shape parts of it. So that's something that really makes, that's part of the DSA difference.
And I would just add, that's like a part of the Zohran experience as well, right? It's not just, you have like say in how things are going, but you're also like building capacity and skills among the membership, which I think is really important. And that gets me to my kind of next question for you. Obviously, what happened in New York with Zohran didn't come out of nowhere. This has been years and years and years of organizing in New York. I mean, New York has had a very strong chapter, has had a lot of success. I'm a Texan. I care a lot about New York for sure, but also the rest of the country. How are we hoping to kind of get this to translate outside of places like New York City?
Well, the very exciting news is that Zohran's win wasn't the only one. On election night, we had wins all over the country. I live in North Carolina, so in the South, we're trying to build the bench there too. We had a great win in Atlanta. Kelsey Bond is now a city council member in Atlanta. She got 64% of the vote. Atlanta is a big city in the South. It's changing pretty quickly, and cities all over the country are shifting in demographics. So we have a base everywhere. Kelsey is an exciting win. Denzel McCampbell is another person who just won city council in Detroit. He got over 58% of the vote. In Minneapolis, we just expanded our share of the city council with Zohran Stevenson getting elected and Robin Wensley got reelected. We have in Cambridge, Ayal Zubi is a candidate who was just elected. So yeah, we're getting wins all over the country, and that's our goal. We want to organize in all 50 states. It's not just in New York City. And the win in New York, people see something like this and think, all right, New York is a uniquely liberal or progressive or potentially left city. But it took 8 years of organizing year after year. I mentioned the city council candidate 8 years ago. It took year after year of building that. And that neighborhood, Bay Ridge, when I was growing up, it was pretty conservative. It's voted reliably Republican for many years, and the demographics have somewhat shifted now. There are more Arabs, more young people. But it took a lot of work to organize that, Like even in a neighborhood like that. I remember a few years ago seeing Arab storefronts that would have a Palestine flag, but also a thin blue line flag supporting the police. So the working class is complicated, it's fractured, it's really all over the place, and it's our job to organize it into a cohesive a political formation. So that's a task all over the country, and DSA is helping do it.
And I would just say, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I really think that whole that's New York, it's so different thing is a little bit of wishful thinking on the part of folks. And there's a historian, Richard Slotkin, who had a definition of ideology as the way people come to understand how knowledge becomes power. And winning a race like this, there are so many people across the country who are looking at, well, I thought socialism was just a liability. That's how it was taught to me. And now it's like, maybe it's actually like something I need to be involved in.
Yeah, and I see, I'm a native New Yorker. I think sometimes, especially people on the coastal cities have kind of a chip on their shoulders about oh, we're not the real America, on some level absorbing the, Republican, the conservative talking points about, there's the cosmopolitan elites on the coasts, and then there's the real heartland. But I think part of why this win is resonating so much is because New York it's the biggest city in the country, it's the wealthiest city in the world, and it's a working class city. It's very diverse. Part of why Zohran is resonating so much and causing so much fear and anxiety for the right is because he represents the immigrant working class that is, that represents America. A week before the election, there was the big rally that he did with the AOC and Bernie, and everybody just really emphasized how New York is, we can make the case that New York is the heart of America, it's the heart of capital, but it's the heart of the working class. I mean, I don't want to essentialize or make New York unique and special, but it is just part of the fabric of America. And I think, how many Americans can trace their ancestry through New York City, right? Through Ellis Island, all of that. I have a big extended family in the United States now, and they all pass through New York City. So I think this is part of why it's resonating so much. It's part of why I'm just going to hold up my prop. I collected my New York Post cover.
Yeah. One of the best ads for our movement ever.
Yeah, it's amazing. Everybody in New York City, yes, I tried to get a copy that week. And, it's so good because it's kind of we think this is positive. It's cool that socialism is becoming mainstream.
Well,
and, they're terrified because they understand, how much, this is a bellwether and they should be scared.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, it's the fact that they're so scared. I mean, my governor in Texas was tweeting up a storm when Zohran got elected, right? And yeah, it's ridiculous the things that he's saying, but it means that our movement is winning because they're really afraid. I wanted to ask you just in the last couple minutes, all right, so Zohran is going to come into office. He's going to be in a very hostile situation. One, how do you think that this movement is can be prepared to try to make sure that these things that he's been campaigning on, running on, can come into fruition? And a second question that I know a lot of people care and worry about a lot, how do we also make sure that Zohran is kind of staying, within and about the movement that got him into power once he kind of ascends to this very, very influential position?
Yeah, that's the critical question, and that's where the work is just beginning. The battles are just beginning. It took so much effort to win this election, and we're coming in with a mandate that Zohran has won. But DSA is going to keep organizing. The inside-outside strategy is so important to what we're doing. We elect people to office and, do whatever they need to inside the halls of government. But we're out on the streets. We're organizing people. We're going to keep doing that. We know that the rich and powerful are going to oppose Zohran and DSA at every turn. We've already seen that they'll stoop to, just really horribly divisive tactics like very crass Islamophobia or racism, just going after queer and trans people that are part of his base, like all these things, like trying to pit wedges and between parts of his base. That's the kinds of tactics they've used for many years. So we can only win the demands of the campaign if we keep building a mass movement of ordinary working class people to defeat this corrupt establishment. And they're going to keep using vicious tactics like that. They're going to, just the New York Post cover, like they're going to do much worse stuff than this. Like this is fun for us a week after the election. But, we're seeing all these crazy AI ads, just envisioning a New York riven by crime. And actually the AI ads are just a next level, representation.
I think it's good that they're associated with the right, though.
Yeah, I think so. But just the point being, we're going to have to keep organizing on the outside and alongside Mayor Mamdani to win a rent freeze, fast and free buses, universal childcare. We're going to keep fighting to get ICE out of our cities, to fight for alternatives to policing that really keep communities safe, and to stand up against Donald Trump's attacks that are going to be even more pointed and vicious against New York City. So there's a lot that we need to really figure out and look at lessons from the past where, left or progressive mayors have come into executive office and the types of obstructions that they had to deal with. We've been looking very closely at cases like, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, or in New York City's own past, like Bill de Blasio and then David Dinkins. But, in the longer history, the people who have been successful in New York City's own history, like Fiorello LaGuardia, or looking at Milwaukee, the whole history of sewer socialism, they were able to achieve a lot when they were in government because they had an organized base, because they kept organizing communities. And that's where, we're hopeful with Zohran, because he comes out of a movement, because he comes out of movement organizing, because he understands that an organized working class base is the way to succeed and win anything. So, we're starting off with a very good advocate in the seat of the mayor, but we're going to keep organizing on the outside to make sure that we're able to back him up and push as far as we need to make sure these things get done.
Well, how can they do that? How can they join? How can
join
they get involved?
DSA? That's a great first part. DSAUSA.org/join. We have a pretty, open membership process. You just sign up, pay dues, and then plug into your chapter. So you can do, there's so many ways to plug in. Just becoming a member is a first step. It's very easy to sign up on our website, and then we plug you into your chapter, and you can, join a meeting. You can just go to socials, reading groups, whatever. But there are all sorts of things happening at your chapter level, wherever you are in the country. So we want to support you to become an organizer. We're an organization of organizers. That's a big part of the pitch we're making. You're not just a name on a list or somebody we just keep hitting up to beg for money, but you're going to become part of an agent of change in building the socialist movement we need.
Well, Ashik Siddique, co-chair, national co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, thank you so much for joining us on the Jacobin Show.
All right, thank you.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for tuning into the Jacobin Show. We're really excited to be launching this. Next week, we have a really exciting episode. We're going to be joined by Brendan James of the Blowback Podcast. We're going to be talking about that absolute ghoul, Dick Cheney, as well as their new season on South Africa, which I'm really looking forward to listening to. We're so excited to be launching this, folks. Thank you so much. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to Jacobin Magazine if you aren't already. We'll be back next Friday. Take care.